Hit that like button, subscribe. Focus Daily TV. Here on Focus Daily TV, we speak about the history of the black man in America and how it relates to biblical prophecy and how, in actuality, rather than being black, we are the actual Israelites. We are Jerusalem. We are the chosen people of God. This land known as North America is our gift that was given to us from God, the promised land, if you will. However, in the late 1700s through the early 1900s, a Holocaust took place. The rightful owners of this land were brutally murdered, and genocide took place in order to disenfranchise us from what rightfully belongs to us. The murderers include various nations. All nations conspired against us, whether it be France, Spain, England, Russia, Germany, Japan, China. Psalms 83. The crafty Council of Nations uplifted us from our birthright and placed us underwater, placed us under maritime laws rather than the laws of this land, which eventually led us to fighting each other and gave birth to what is commonly known as black on black crime. During the late 1800s and early 1900s, a great migration took place. The rightful owners of this land were uplifted from their property and shipped to democratic areas all around this country, but mainly in five major cities, five major democratic metropolises. And these became known as projects and ghettos. While we all didn't live directly in the project or the ghetto, we all suffered the same symptoms as our fellow brothers and sisters. That's why it is up to us to awaken, return back to the Word of God, this word right here, the Holy Bible, excuse me, and refamiliarize ourselves with the laws of God so that we can return back to our prominence as a people. So let's get to a little reading, what the word says about it. Do not hate a fellow Israelite in your heart. Rebuke your neighbor frankly, so you will not share in his guilt. Leviticus 19:17. So today we're speaking about that hate and how that hate was formed. How we were placed in a situation which led to us being at each other's throats, which led to a crab in a barrel type mentality. Got a little film on it. Let's see it. Here we go.
Like many songs will tell you,
bullet holes left in my peak holes.
the story of what housing and other living conditions look like for many Black Americans is pretty bleak, and that's by design. In addition to artists cataloging their very personal experiences,
When the landlord dissed us, no heat. Wonder why Christmas missed us.
it's been proven that the modern phenomenon of concentrated Black poverty was an intentional government-sponsored institution. This is in part why President Biden issued an executive order back in January intended to
Lies.
highlight the historical wrongs Black folks have faced when it comes to housing and home ownership in this country. But first,
Quite the contrary. He was writing legal parchments that entrenched us deeper into these situations. It's all about the wording. And here on Focus Daily TV, that's what we do. We break down the law in an attempt to give people the option of returning back to the true law, the laws of the land, the laws of the Father, the God of the Bible.
let's take it back.
Hit that like button, subscribe. Hey, support the channel. Cash App, #, Focus Daily TV.
Dawn of the 20th century, African Americans in major cities lived scattered throughout the city. They weren't segregated particularly.
See, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, we had flourishing communities, especially here in the South. We had a strong foothold in this federal government. But right after Reconstruction and the assassination of Lincoln, they began to systematically tear down our communities, kill the inhabitants of those communities, and replace them with themselves, with foreigners arriving through Ellis Island and other ports, if you will.
It's only with the great migration of 6 to 7 million African Americans north and west. They weren't segregated parties, lived scattered.
So at a certain point, they began to round us up from those communities, the ones who would voluntarily leave, and force them into these ghettos. The ones who wouldn't leave, that's where that Holocaust took place. I'm mainly here to speak about the coming of the Lord and to let you people know that it's time to turn from our wicked ways. It's time to return to the will, commandments, and laws of the Father so that we can get ourselves out of these situations we find ourselves trapped in. Let's go.
But first, let's take it back.
The dawn of the 20th century, African Americans in major cities lived scattered throughout the city. They weren't segregated particularly.
They weren't slaves. These doesn't look like slaves. These look like sophisticated people. How do we find ourselves in the situation that we find ourselves in today when we once were glorious?
It's only with the great migration of 6 to 7 million African Americans north and west escaping the South, the predominant response of the United States government and state and local governments to the throughout the city.
The way history is told is they was escaping the South, but actually there was a federal military campaign going on in the South to truly disenfranchise the blacks of those areas, the Afro-Americans, the Israelites, Jerusalem. A Holocaust.
City, they weren't segregated particularly. It's only with the great migration of 6 to 7 million African Americans north and west escaping the South, the predominant response of the United States government and state and local governments to the great migration was to contain black people in their own neighborhoods. And HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, was particularly a part of this role. With the precursors to HUD introduced and encouraged.
HUD is on the hook. That's why. Right through the nose.
Racially restrictive covenants, redlining of every major city where African Americans landed. The federal government was a sponsor of covenants, redlining of neighborhoods. And HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, was particularly a part of this role. With the precursors to HUD introduced and encouraged racially restrictive covenants, redlining of every major city where African Americans landed. The federal government was a sponsor of urban renewal, infamously called Negro removal by the great James Baldwin.
Urban renewal, which means moving the Negroes out.
The Negro Removal Act. We'll get more into that later.
Negro removal, that is what it means. And the federal government is an accomplice.
So you got to ask yourself a question. Removal from what? The way they tell the story, we were slaves and we didn't own anything and we just barely became free with Abraham Lincoln. But all of a sudden they're removing us? The truth is we were here all along. When they first arrived, they seen us, they seen our glorious kingdom that was benefited to us by the Father. and they immediately wanted to disenfranchise it.
To this fact.
That so-called urban renewal also included a federally sponsored interstate highway system, which was intentionally designed to mow through vibrant black neighborhoods. Take Miami, for example. 2 highways, I-95 and I-395, bulldoze right through the predominantly black and low-income Overtown neighborhood.
Okay, that's it. They're going into explanations. We're not here for that. We're here to present what happened, present the laws of God, and show how biblical prophecy, is being fulfilled, and the Lord is on his way. Until next time, hit that like button, subscribe, hashtag Focus Daily TV. We out.